Next up, I'm going to be talking to Lisa Dent, who is the new executive director of Artspace. She's been here for a minute, but she's new to me, and she's fairly new to the city. And so she's going to come on and talk about Artspace and her and, arts in the community and all that good stuff. So I'm excited to welcome her to this community. Good morning, Lisa Dent.
Good morning. How are you?
How are you? How are you?
I am very well this morning, getting settled into my new place, which I'm excited about.
Where's your new place? Where are you?
I moved into Westville. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you buy a house? Are you renting? What are you doing? You got a tent?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in a house. It was pretty clear I needed some outdoor space. So I was able to find something with a little backyard, which made me happy.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. That's nice. And that's not a hard do here in New Haven. Do you know what I mean? Like, space is not a premium like it's in other places.
Yes.
So how long have you been here?
I moved in May initially. I had been working since the beginning of April. Most of the work has been remote until we opened our exhibition, Revolution on Trial, in July. So I was slowly moving from Harlem, bringing things back and forth for a while. And now I'm feeling like I'm getting settled in. It's great.
Okay. So you kind of inherited the Revolution exhibition.
Oh yeah, this is an exhibition that's been in the planning stages for a couple of years. And curators LaTanya Autry and Sarah Fritchie had met, and LaTanya had given a walking tour as part of her work when she was at the Yale University Art Gallery. And the walking tour was giving a history of Black liberation movements in New Haven, and particularly the locations where the Black Panther chapter was active. And Sarah then learned about May Day, which was the day of protest against the incarceration of 9 members who were put on trial at the time for attempted murder and several other charges related to the death of one of the members. It's a fascinating story. The May Day, event brought thousands of National Guardsmen to the New Haven Green to try and settle things down. It was a really challenging time, and I think you understand the impact of that when you realize 4 days later, National Guardsmen were at Kent State University and had murdered students. So yeah, there was very much the possibility that that kind of tragedy could have happened in New Haven. Fortunately, it did not, but the curators thought it was a moment to honor the 50th anniversary of that day by asking new artists to bring their ideas around liberation movements today in response to what had happened in the past, and talk about some of the new organizations that have come up, and bring forward those ideas 50 years later.
Mm-hmm. So how well received was it? Because you had a conversation with there was a conversation between Angela Davis and Ms. Huggins.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of all kinds of activity around this exhibition. I know Mercy Quay did some stuff, some beautiful stuff. So it's been a wonderful tribute to that particular moment in history, and it still happened even in the midst of COVID.
Yes, and I have to hand it to the artists and Mercy Quay of the Narrative Project for needing to pivot, all of them, in the work that they were asked to do in the time of COVID. And the fact that all of them were able to still produce amazing work while needing to social distance, while not having access to some of the fabricators and vendors that they would normally work with, yeah, it's just truly, for me, an example of, what Black and brown people can do in these times, really difficult times. We don't stop trying to create beauty in the world and showing
Right,
people what love is.
right. And that's a whole history. I mean, we can go back to 1619 and
Mm-hmm.
beyond, and you will
Yeah,
find love and community, even in the most desperate of times, right? That is
absolutely.
our history. So tell me a little bit about you, Lisa. Like, what made you say yes to New Haven?
Oh, it's funny because I previously worked at an arts foundation, and a couple of artists who had received our grant were living in New Haven and loving it. So this is about 6 years ago, and started to say, oh, come to New Haven. Why don't you move to New Haven? And I hadn't considered it.
Because you're like,
Yeah,
where the hell is New Haven? I don't know where that is.
and the last time I'd been to New Haven was Yale University's campus when my very smart older sister was being recruited. It was certainly not necessarily where I wanted to go, and it ended up not being
Right.
where she wanted to go. But yeah, I didn't have a good context for what it meant to live here. But more importantly, I knew about Artspace. I had been visited exhibitions a few times. I had met the previous executive director, Helen Cowder. I
Mhm.
understood what the mission was, and that was the most important to me. So I made a decision several years ago that I only wanted to work at artist-centered organizations. And it didn't necessarily have to all be a space like Artspace that presents exhibitions. I didn't necessarily need to be in a gallery that was selling work, but I needed to know that the leadership and the board were thinking about bringing contemporary work by artists to audiences, even if some of that work would be challenging, and supporting kind of alternative to ideas to what might be in the national media at any given time.
And what does that mean?
I think for me, it means that we're offering a place where the main concern is not
The white gaze.
the white gaze and who we are supporting financially, right? That we are the idea is not necessarily to make as much money as we possibly can and to profit from it, that we are looking at ways to educate, that we are involved in supporting artists in a way that they can better support themselves, and that we also are helping audiences consider ideas that they may not see in mainstream media. So think there's not a way, I feel like, outside of games where you can look at things that are happening in virtual reality or the augmented reality work that's happening that creates something that is not just a representation of, or trying to be a representation of, what we see every day. That it might show us and reveal things that are new, and especially for artists who are interested in creating, that we are a platform to support them in wanting to create new things that may not be needing to go to production for the mass market, right?
Mhm.
The main thing isn't necessarily how many of these things can we sell. That we want to educate and ask questions and think about some of the big challenging questions in the world through the visual artist lens.
So now that you're here and you're fully here now, I mean, you got some place to live and all that kind of stuff. So
Yes.
when does the season start for you? Like, when do you say, okay, here is what I imagine art space should look like? Like, when do you put your own stamp on it? Because you inherited stuff. So when does that
Yeah.
run out and you begin?
There have been some funding for programs for next year. And I've been in conversation with the funders to think about how we can make some of the promises we made happen, but also do that in a way that I think connects New Haven to each other in the world in, I think, more productive ways. So I think it'll be next year in September when you'll begin to see the way in which I'd like to continue with programming and visitor engagement at Artspace.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, you have a really rich background.
Mhm.
You know, you let's see. I'm looking at your bio a little bit, and you were the Helena Rubinstein Fellow at MoMA,
Mhm.
which is you held staff positions at the New Museum of Contemporary Art. So is contemporary art your favorite thing? Like what is it about contemporary art that you feel connected to?
Yeah, I wish I could pinpoint exactly the moment, but I knew by the end of my freshman year in college that I wanted to work with living artists.
Where'd you
I
go to?
had been, yeah, I'd been more of a theater person in high school, decided not to pursue that in college, went in undeclared, wandered into my first liberal studies class, which was an art history class, and suddenly realized that this is exactly how I was taught to see the world. I happened to have a mother who would take us to museums, and we would learn about different cultures through their objects. And that was a way that I understood to study, to learn, to educate myself, was what was made, who made it, why was it made. And I think I was always around artists. I felt more connected to people who were making work like that. And so it felt like a natural progression to find ways to support them. I used to make things, but I wasn't a great drawer. I did some photography, but pretty quickly I realized my passion was not to have people see what I had made, and that instead I wanted to, support other people and create spaces where they could show what they had made.
And
And
that's a real talent. That's a
I
necessary
mean,
talent.
and I had learned that, yeah, so that my first internship was at one of the Smithsonian Institution's museums for contemporary art, the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, and in Washington, D.C., when I was a student at Howard. And yeah, I learned that this was a profession, that this was something that I could do. I think it took me a long time to find how I could do it without feeling like I was so different, or my way of working was so strange and challenging. I think museums then and even now have a lot of work to do in terms of inviting in staff from different backgrounds and understanding the work styles and ways that we do things. So, as I got older, I just found that my sweet spot was finding a small institution, with, just about 4 or 5 employees really working together and doing great things in order for living artists to be able to do what they do.
And so, as a Black woman moving through all these spaces, you went to undergrad at Howard. Is that where you
Yes.
went, Howard? Okay. And
Mhm.
so going into these museum spaces that are historically not Black spaces or don't have a whole lot of Black people, how did you sort of keep your sanity? How did you hold yourself in those spaces?
It was pretty lonely for a while, I have to say. I mean, there were other art students at Howard who were my friends, and there were a couple of art history students. It was a pretty small department. But when I was interning at the Hirshhorn, I felt fortunate that there was another Black woman working in education department who had selected me for the internship along with a couple of other women. But I just found that I was being asked to, I think, not speak up as much and temper like the way that I process things. And I think the biggest challenge for me was that I had selected Howard because I intentionally wanted to learn more about African and African American art and art history. But, you know, pretty quickly saw that that knowledge was not encouraged or necessarily important in those larger institutions. So instead of feeling like I walked in as an expert as anyone else was, by the time I was working at MoMA in New York, for instance, the artists I knew weren't being talked about as much. And there were only a couple of curators that were even spending time studying these artists and learning about these artists. So I felt really different, and I didn't have the kind of self-esteem at that time to just say, well, I don't care about them, you know, I'm going to do my own thing. I then tried to read and learn and just know even more, with the idea that everyone must know both. It took me a while to realize that a lot of my colleagues actually were never going to spend time learning about African American art or art history or African art, and didn't feel it was necessary. And, you know, somebody else could do that. And there was less of a place for it and need for it in a lot of these institutions.
And so when you
Yeah.
realize that, Lisa, what do you do? What do you do when you realize that? When you have that moment, when you have those moments of they're not going to, just what you said. So what do you do? How do you
Yeah.
still have a love for this, or do you change what you love, and do you build on what other people would who find beautiful and attractive and worthy of conversing about?
So for me, I actually took a break because I thought it was very confusing. And about 4 or 5 years after I had been in New York, I just decided that I was going to do something else. I was going to focus more on theater and film production, and I was designing scenery, and I was, you know, doing this other work. I do think that theater and film people are more used to working collaboratively, and there were more Black and brown people participating in that, certainly because this was after Spike Lee, and there were more opportunities for people and encouragement to do those things. But a few years later, I realized that there was something about what happens in the visual arts that appealed to me more, which is that I think visual artists pay more attention to what materials they're using when they're great and why they're using them, and are interested in talking about the world through those materials in a way that theater and film artists are not necessarily interested in. So it was where I meant to be. And so I had actually moved back to my hometown of San Francisco, and I just was working an admin job at the San Francisco Opera, thinking, well, maybe, you know, this will just be fine. But I ended up opening my own gallery. I just couldn't stop like supporting these artists, you know, the perfectly fine 9-to-5 job with healthcare and all these things. And I
paid the rent, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. And I just said, you know, you know, I wasn't, the nonprofits that were there and the other galleries, I wasn't seeing a space that really supported artists of color in their sort of late emerging mid-career, and that people that I thought were doing really important work. I didn't see that they had a space to exhibit, so I wanted to create one. And I did that for a few years before I went back to curatorial work. And just, it began the journey of being really clear about what I needed, the kind of institution I needed to work in, what I needed around me in order to do this work, and to not neither apologize for it or feel like I was doing something less than something fantastic, you know.
So you find yourself in New Haven at
Mm.
Artspace. When you walk in, when you take the job and you walk in and you already inherited some stuff, do you come in with a sense of, I know what I want to do. I have a sense of what could play well here. I have
Mm.
a sense of what needs to happen that's missing in these art
Yeah.
spaces.
I'm so glad you said that, because interviewing can be really challenging for these jobs. There was a period of time when there would be this question like, what is your vision for the space? And I think thankfully that question might have gone away, because I personally think it's important to be responsive to the area that you live and to the community and the economic system that you work in. So it took me a few months. I would say just in the last month or so, I've been more clear about what I think the potential is for Artspace and how we can still have a connection to its history, its amazing 30-year history as an alternative space, showing some great artists over the years, and continue to do that. And also consider New Haven City as a primary audience, and the national, regional, or national audience, but that it doesn't need to be either or.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we do that in not just being in the city, but in our very particular location in downtown New Haven, and in our very particular, 5,000 square feet that used to be a retail location? How does the architecture of that building impact the way that we are seen in the community, and how we show work?
Oh,
So
that's wonderful to think about it that way.
yes, yes, and I'm thankful also that we were able to open safely, asking people to wear masks and social distance, because I did need to be at Artspace and see audiences come through, see how people are moving back and forth in the street, see how the city flowed when people are starting to go back to work, and have a slightly better understanding of who is coming, why are they coming to the show, and what other things have they done with Artspace that they felt really great about, but what other things made them not feel connected, and
Mm-hmm.
how could we improve upon that?
So do you feel like, Lisa, that you can push the envelope? Is New Haven ready for edgier stuff or different kinds of things that are, I don't like to use the word safe, but I understand
Yeah.
safe in the context of, you know, choosing something that doesn't stir controversy as opposed to something that's like, oh, okay, this is pretty.
Yeah, I actually think New Haveners are, and I think that our current exhibition has shown that to me, because the work is not all easy, and there's beauty in some of it, but it's not because it's figurative. Not all the work is a representation, a clear representation of Black people. It's takes a little bit longer to read and to learn and to understand why some of the objects were made and what they're made of and what they're made from. So I've felt like I've been able to use this exhibition to help people see that the use of a material can be very important and not something that you know right away. And if you're willing to spend time with it and understand where that material comes from, why that material is available, you begin to understand the political economy of our city, our region, our country. And I think that you can do that and still have something that's visually compelling, like that you want to look at, that's really interesting, that's beautiful. It doesn't have to be something that you cringe when you look at. And those really do tend to be artists that I think are exceptional. they have the ability to transform materials in such a way that we see it in a way that we've never seen it before, so that we can begin to talk about where it comes from, why it comes from there, what it's connected to, and learn more about the world around us.
Mm-hmm. So, what's the Artspace season like? What's up now? What comes next? Like, how do you run this space?
So this season, this year, which is our fiscal year is July through June. So we tend to think of the year in that context. So after Revolution on-trial closes on October 17th, we are going to spend a couple of weeks putting together the next show, which is Who Governs, curated by a local historian named Frank Mitchell.
I know Frank Mitchell.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a New Haven treasure.
Yes, exactly. So it was actually Sarah who invited Frank to do a project, and he decided he wanted to look at a book called Who Governs by Ronald Dahl, and who was a Yale sociologist who used the city of New Haven to look at the data around the demographics of the city, to talk about how resources are deployed through government. And having artists think about this book, the ideas behind this book, we're commissioning 2 artists to make new work. We're bringing in a few other works, one that had previously been shown several years ago, an artist hoping to engage people in a conversation about civic duty. And so we're really trying to use it as an opportunity to talk about how and why New Haven itself has the resources that it has for people, but maybe even beyond, help people understand how these decisions get made in government.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And so do you, when you decide a year, a curatorial year, do you say that curatorial year?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think of building it? Do you say, you know what, I'm a woman, I need to build in some women things. I'm Black, I need to build in some Black things. I'm a Black woman, I need to build in some Black woman things. Like, do you think like that? Do you have to be thinking about all the layers and labels that you are and bring to this job in creating a year of exhibition, a season of exhibition?
I think you do. I think it's important to help your audience come to exhibitions, public programs, other things over a period of time and build knowledge slowly around a certain idea. And I was actually really thrilled that Helen Cowder and Sarah Fritchie had already taken on this idea of a theme that would sort of be over an entire year. And I do think that we will continue to do something like that. And so that in our next year, we are hoping to look at the relationship between US and international cities, and some of the artists who are spent half their lives in other places and then chose New Haven as their home. So we're trying to think about what that relationship is, why that happens, and what kind of artistic production comes out of that, and thinking about that relationship. So that will drive our exhibitions and programs next year in the way that Society and Civic Duty is driving programs this year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Artspace is a gallery, a performance spaces, all these things. How do you raise money to keep these doors open?
Do
you think about that?
Oh yeah. In fact, that's my main job. People often ask me about, what exhibitions am I going to do, as a curator, but I am not going to be the curator. My main focus is to raise money and build audiences. And that's another way that I've been really thrilled by the local support for Artspace already. that there are donations coming in and continue to come in right now. Actually, we are in the middle of our fall fundraiser. We have a silent auction site where you can purchase artwork from area artists as well as donate to Artspace right now. And, you know, I've received any donations anywhere from $10 to $5,000 from individual over the last 6 months who have either reached out and said they were excited about, you know, a new team and wanted to see what Artspace was going to be doing and wanted to support anything and everything we were doing. I've been in conversation with the foundations who have previously supported Artspace quite a lot and thinking about how to support it in the future. So a lot of my job is, you know, at some part every day, I'm talking to people about fundraising, because the truth of the matter is we are in a challenging place. We did have a full-time staff member responsible for programming, and we don't have that right now, where I'm the full-time employee and we have several part-time people and interns right now. But there are things that we don't have as an institution that we really need to have. We need more funding to maintain our 5,000 square foot space. We need funding to support our staff, because currently there is no healthcare plan for staff at Artspace. And in the middle of COVID, that makes it extremely challenging, and is something that I think needs to be changed. And so we need funding to support professional development workshops that we can have subsidized, so that artists are only paying $5 or $10 to take a workshop, an important class, rather than 50 or 100. And so we're able to keep a lot of our costs to the artists low because of these foundations that are supporting us. And so we need to keep that going.
And so I don't know anything about your board. How is your board?
Yeah,
and how many people on this board?
Yeah, they're great. I mean, for me, right now, it's a fantastic combination of artists. We have 5 artists on the board. We have local civic leaders who work at other area nonprofits. We have an attorney, an architect, people work in hospital administration. I mean, and the diversity of that includes the fact that so many are women and people of color on our board. So I'm thrilled.
That seems to be a big deal, because I serve on a bunch of boards around, and everybody's having these conversations because, historically, boards, nonprofit boards, arts boards have been white, just white, just white. And so, and so, you've been following along the national conversation around arts institutions that are Black folks at art institutions are starting to speak out. They've signed a letter talking about, these are the things that we need to have happen to be inclusive, not only diverse, but inclusive.
Yes.
And so it's good to hear that the Artspace board is diverse. Is it as diverse as you want it to be?
Honestly, it's really good. I think what I would like to see are the people of color that are on the board are largely artists or on the artistic side. I think that I would like to see business leaders or civic leaders of color on our board, and we're slowly getting there. I too often think that also the people of color on a board are meant to speak for the community, whatever the community necessarily means for them. And I think that I'd like to see board members who are actually brought on for their expertise around, fundraising, organizational structure or management, and HR, things like that. that are really part of the skill set of a lot of people and who are not necessarily brought to the table as board members of nonprofits.
And
So
how big is your staff over there? How many people you got on staff over there?
So it's myself. There are 2 part-time staff people who were there when I started. And just in the last couple of weeks, we've been able to add 1 person who works full-time through the Public Ally Program of AmeriCorps. Yeah. Anissa Carter has just started and is an amazing addition. We have another person who decided not to go to Yale this semester for a variety of reasons, as you can imagine, around COVID. So they're going to be working here. And this is somebody who actually grew up in New Haven as well. And another young woman who's a Yale student who's coming in part-time. So that's who we're working with now.
Okay, all right. So have you enjoyed any of well, COVID put a damper on a lot of the social activities that go on in this town, because this is a very social town.
Yeah.
And it really is it's a good town to eat and drink in, right? It's a good town to take in theater. It's a good town to take in intellectual pursuits. COVID has really sort of put a damper on a lot of that. But, this town is resilient in a lot of ways and trying to figure out ways to sort of give people back those kinds of activities safely. So what have you been enjoying since you've been here?
I recently went to Amarante's cafe on the water. And, as someone from California, to be able to be this close to water and sit and look at the sunset that way, it was heaven. There was music, it was an amazing singer, and it was fantastic. Hoping to check out, is it Anthony's down the road?
Yes, Anthony's down the road.
Maybe next week.
You can just go to City Point. There's Shell and Bones in City Point, which is a little closer. And you can sit right on the water there too. It sits right at the end of a historical neighborhood.
Went hiking once. This was early, I think July. Went hiking with some folks from Next Haven, with Nico Whedon and some of the artists there. We walked from Westville into the park. But it was so wonderful. What else?
She's a good friend. I was with her the other week.
Oh yeah,
having a happy hour with her and her husband.
Yes, and I lived by Edgewood Park recently, which was really fascinating when you realize that Frederick Olmsted had designed it, as well as the edge of Central Park, where I would go with my dog when I was living in Harlem. So it was very similar, and is a great walk for me and my dog. And then Orange Street, where Artspace is, it has closed to driving traffic. So they've created, one of the downtown beautiful outdoor seating areas for the restaurants that are on our block. And it's been great to be able to have events there on the street, outside, in front of us. So I've really started to enjoy walking around downtown and seeing people again.
Have you engaged in the pizza wars?
And if you'd asked me 10 years ago, they're so real. And I almost took an apartment in Worcester Square between the 2 rivals, and I thought, I can't be right here. And 10 years ago, I would have dived right into it. My digestion at this age is not appreciation pizza as much. But I did just hear about the white clam pizza, and it kind of thought, that does sound good.
Yeah. These pizza wars are very real here. Like they're international.
Yes. And because several people who knew I was moving asked me, which is it, Sally's or what? Like, what's your pizza?
Sally's or Pepe's or Mod. I'm gonna throw Delana's in there because I can't have dairy. So they do a wonderful, they do beautiful vegan pizzas,
Okay.
beautiful vegan pizzas that rival that holy trinity, you know, Sally, Pepe, and Modern, the holy trinity of
Yeah.
pizzas.
Exactly.
So yeah, okay. Well, you will get dragged in, no doubt, no doubt. You'll make
Yeah.
you'll try them all, and then you'll make your decision.
Yes.
And it's an
Yes.
ongoing war,
Yes.
So okay. Well,
Exactly.
it has been my pleasure talking to you, Lisa. I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you're here. I want to support whatever you do. Feel like this is your home. If you want to come and talk to the community in any way that you like, and talk about what's coming, and you
Yes.
know, feel free
Yes.
to come here. Call me up and say, Babz, I need to get on a Thursday, and we can make it happen.
Yes. Love it.
So
Like,
yes.
this is exactly the kind of community support that I was seeing in New Haven and why I was excited to be here. So thank you so much.
And I have not been over to see the exhibit. So now that I know it ends in October, I will make a beeline
Yes.
to come see it. I've heard good things about it,
Oh,
really
great.
good things about it. So I'm going to get over there before it leaves, and see
Wonderful.
it. So I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to my city and my town, and whatever I can do to help make this journey here better, or I don't know, whatever. Call me.
Thank you. I will take you up on that.
Yes, please do. Please do. And there's a lot of other places to eat other than the Holy Trinity pizzas. So,
Yes,
so
absolutely.
thank you, Lisa Dent.
Okay.
Be well and enjoy your weekend.